and welcome to our virtual roundtable focusing on insights to China.
In general, China's economy is recovering, but the structure of the aggregate demand is expected to continue to focus on private domestic demand. Real consumption growth is projected to gradually recover, supported by the ongoing labor market recovery, rising household incomes, and also improved consumer confidence. Besides, investment will also remain an engine of growth. As the global recovery is gaining momentum, export demand will also keep industrial capacity utilization high in the short term. Despite the surge in some imported raw material prices and a pickup in domestic demand, consumer price inflation remains until now below target, which is a good sign. Industrial production continued also to slow down in the third quarter, while the service industry was also affected by the epidemic in several provinces. When we're talking about an epidemic in China, we're talking about just several hundreds of cases. And the growth rate of the manufacturing investment driven by the export is relatively stable, but real estate and infrastructure investment growth rate are rapidly declining too. Despite the slowdown, China is still the first overseas market for many international brands. The size of the Chinese market has far exceeded the local market size for these brands. Just give you an example, Swiss, an Australian life-enhancing product company, its parent company Kenwood reported first quarter 2020 results, which total revenue was increased by 13%. And their revenue on Chinese market was increased by 32.3%. And especially if we look at China's imported cross-border e-commerce market, the transaction scale reached nearly $480 billion in 2020, and it is expected to reach nearly $550 billion in 2021.
What is the message you want delivered to your audience? Let's forget about channel. Let's start from message. So we call the story is always there. The story where you want delivered to your customer, the story definitely will be different from the story you want delivered to your government, the story you want to your internal stakeholder and employees. So this is the first thing I want to share is about how we messaging our stories to our stakeholders. Then once you have the story, we can help you to choose what is the right channel. A lot of Chinese media, they are owned by the government. So let's focus on the mainstream media. That will be the part. And when we're talking about social media, that is definitely the WeChat. Because just trust me, everyone uses WeChat in China, everyone. Yeah, and they spend over 6 hours on their iPhones and on WeChat. That is our daily life. So WeChat is definitely the territory when you need to go into there. The trendy is similar to the global trendy. For example, the print media is going downsize. The government media is still dominating. It is something similar in China, but the social media is just booming. For example, I'm living in China. Even for me, there's hundreds of apps and channels going out each year. So even for me, it is not clear which one is the best use, but let's choose the most powerful and dominant ones. Those are the government media, mainstream media, and WeChat, one of the key social media.
This homestay called Shangqian Elite, which is a homestay that was launched by a group of urban Gen Zers in Zhejiang province. And it very much stands to symbolize the kind of go rural trend in China at the moment. So domestic tourism is going very rural. The bookings on Sea Trip increased by over 300%, so about 350%, 2021 versus 2019 in terms of people wanting to experience rural tourism. And so we see a prioritization of mental health. We see Nike giving employees a de-stress week after COVID. But I think we cannot really speak about sustainability in travel yet. So this is very niche, but definitely a trend towards rural tourism and mental health and de-stressing. I wanted to feature something that I saw trending very much recently, which is Olay's campaign, Fearless of Judgment, I'm Just Beautiful, which, as you can see, garnered huge viewership. So this is about actually going away from very strict beauty standards that you had in China, have still in China, about exactly how your nose has to be with a high bridge, big eyes, with double eyelids, etc. So very, very strict sort of beauty criteria that women, extreme thinness, feel socially pressured to adhere to. And Olay is moving away from that with other brands as well. And in this case, diversity is really, I want to be my own person. I want to have my own beauty. I do not want to be imprisoned by these very harsh criteria. We have Yimi Shiji, which is an online farm-to-table farmers market. And again, it creates this bridge between farmers and consumers, and it offers environmentally friendly food options, but also a lot of education.
Two different normal in the China and the world, and also the national pride for consumers to choose brand. I think these are the two like macro big words that influencing people's decision. Fundamentally, I think brands and business need to realize these two normal are different. The foundations are different, and therefore there are many industries will be influence, such as restaurant, such as travel, and such as e-commerce, etc. And these are the big contexts where the national pride and the national sentiments are also very different. People, I think, especially the younger generation in China, they really appreciate what the country have been doing, and also they would prefer to choose Chinese brands in some specific category, such as sport, especially when Nike has a public how to say that, I think they have been boycotted because of an issue, and right after that, this trend has been seen in other category as well, such as the fast fashion like H&M. So in some particular category, people do start choosing brands because of it is a national brand or not. Another way, I think many brands are leveraging the national narrative to rebuild the brands, such as I think one of our clients are doing that, especially on the Olympic platforms, where people can really resonate with their country. So I think national pride is a big thing that influencing the Chinese new generation when they're choosing the brands, and when they're looking at how this brand represents, what is the value that the brand represents. The Nike has treated the low tier guests really bad, and I also seen that on Weibo as well. Like many people asking Nike, why do you think you can treat our consumers in this way? So people start to look at the brands to ask them their social responsibility, what this brand has contributed to our society. They would ask questions like that.
Talk about that. For the e-commerce live streaming, I think it is necessity for all the e-commerce partners, because just like Katie said, with the COVID, everyone is working at home, so we spend most of the time on our iPhones, our laptops. So live streaming is booming, not from that time. It's already been here for over 5 years, but that is booming during the COVID-19. And also, there is also a lot of Chinese consumer, they are getting used to that. They are used to, we have Li Jiaqi, who have over billions followers. And that is what the world cannot imagine. A KOL have over billions followers. And also one of these live streaming part, they can sell 10 million goods in just 5 minutes.
So previously, I think e-commerce are product oriented. People are having a product in their mind, and then they're going to the e-commerce platform and searching for that product specifically. However, now when they don't even have the product in their mind, they just want to look at some content and to entertain themselves. They realize that, oh, this kind of products in that content might attracts me and has interest. I have interest towards the product, and that is called the interest e-commerce. So to selling the products to people through the content, through the relevance, entertaining content, and that is how TikTok is trying to explore their e-commerce model as well. And that has a huge influence for marketing and advertising, because we are not thinking all this communication around the product is no longer product oriented or consumption occasion oriented. Even it's about like how this can be relevant with people in the most broad general way. When we are competing with so many other interesting content, how can this content stand out? So that is a totally different game. And I want to introduce this concept, interest e-commerce to everyone.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly chime in with Katie in terms of what live streaming satisfies. So we have, of course, the one motivator, which is convenience. But we have another really important one, which is brand experience. And I think live streaming is just the best way online to deliver that brand experience. So Chinese consumer relatively need a lot more trust building with brands. So there's a trust deficit in China. And for a lot of brands, especially, for example, Western brands, they really want to get an experience of the brand world, the brand universe. So that, I think, is why live streaming, which is popular across the world, but is especially important and popular in China.
Addressable market. Before talking about addressable market, I think we have already discussed a lot about e-commerce platforms. So I think now with the current infrastructure in China now, you can receive your goods very easily. Just for example, from Beijing to Shenzhen in 2 or 3 days, over more than 2,200 kilometers. So of course, usually when we're doing the promotion, people are thinking about the targeting to target the most populated cities. And in China, we have some 6 cities with more than 10 million people, and also another 11 cities with population between 5 million to 10 million. So you have got Shanghai, Beijing, Chongqing, these mega cities. And thanks to the e-commerce platforms, so I think also the goods are much more easily to get to reach also the rural area.
I agree with you, Ting. With the development of technology and also the development of the transportation like trains, I think the definition of tier 1, tier 2 city will be changed. Yeah, just very quickly it will be changed because the city is the gap between cities is getting closer, and also the technology make it available for the products or a lot of service. For example, do you know which city has the most university graduates worldwide? Do you think Shanghai, Beijing? But actually it is Wuhan. Wuhan has the most graduates university in the world, not only China. So that's why a lot of semiconductor companies, they will set their office, even headquarters in Wuhan, because in their city, they have the most graduate, the most talent for their development in China. So I think that is the changing for around China, because in this year, Chinese has claimed that we have eliminated poverty, totally poverty cities in China. So that is also closing the gap between different cities. And so this will be a lot of brands, if they want to go to China, they need to think about what is their strategy. What is their, they might to do more diversified target audience analysis. Yeah, just for example, KFC or McDonald's, they do very good for city diversity. They go to a different cities and even tiers 4 or 5 cities. You can see all these restaurants there.
it's both this kind of rise of rural China and second and third tier China, definitely driven by technology and also by government policy. So the government has already capped the big cities, so they're not going to let Beijing, Shanghai, etc. grow over 25 million. And they are driving a lot of infrastructure and development into moving people into lesser cities. And so as Frank mentioned, also there's a huge move now. So some cities are now, they used to be tier 2, like Chengdu, they're now new tier 1. So there's a lot of movement to create a bit more equality between different cities and move people from these mega cities to other ones.
Chinese people are not only consuming goods, but also we are producing, we are planting. This should be the positive way to see China and to see how Chinese people are working on the sustainability. And also another question is that when we say this, not only the forest movement, but also a lot of the high technologies, as what I know here in Shenzhen, in Great Bay Area, they are working very hard, by using the AI, using the big data, or using the new materials to really reduce the consumption of the electricities, or the waters, or the what we can find, the natural resources. I think really we should look at things in a rather positive way.
So first of all, as Ting mentioned, there is a lot of good news. So China is definitely a world leader in green technologies. So again, China is a world leader in green technologies, because I think in the West there's a lot of China bashing going on, but they are doing a lot of very good things in terms of moving forwards that agenda. However, also, I think as Katie said, it's not equal yet throughout the population. It's a huge place. So there are many areas in China where people are catching up. They're still very much in a logic of consumerism. And then there are places where they've had already, for example, recycling. So recycling was rolled out in terms of cities, like in an A, B, C system, or A cities, so more sophisticated, bigger cities, were put in the program first. So you have a lot more conscientiousness in certain places rather than others. But when we do research in market, it's true that some of the finer sort of points of sustainability, again, when we spoke about, sustainability in travel, sustainable travel, people didn't quite understand what we were speaking about. And we get a lot of feedback of, hey, we are still a developing market. So one factor of sustainability is still feeding everybody and giving everybody access to necessities, etc. So it's a moving feast where the government is very much leading, and I think consumers are catching up in different rhythms across China.
The Chinese culture, I think it's not like in the United States that the people have different type of species. We don't have that in China, I think in general, but we do respect local culture, and especially about food. When people are exploring like different types of food in Guangdong and Sichuan and Dongbei, that's definitely a part of Chinese culture. And also when we are looking at the tourism industry, people have an aspirations about the destination that's far away from cities, such as Xinjiang, such as Yunnan, and people do talk about that culture as well. And that is sort of like an exotic culture, but it's still within the Chinese culture. So those local culture has been talked about, but not like people oriented. I think it's about like the culture, the destination itself. Is not like Latino and different from African American. That's totally different two concepts when we talk about culture in China.
Yeah, I agree that local cultures are becoming more important. So even I noticed recently talking about, for example, skincare and beauty, that consumers in Chengdu will be more preferring a certain ingredient, and then consumers in Shanghai and Beijing would go for another one. So you have these differences, but you have them everywhere. But I do think there are sort of main points about Chinese culture that are important to understand. For example, if you work on food or beauty in China, it's impossible not to know about Chinese traditional medicine because it still underpins people's attitudes. For example, the popularity in China for beauty from within. That's because in China, you know, what you eat is really, really important. It's, you know, health and food are very much intertwined. And equally, when you market food, it's important to understand the underpinning sort of notions that everybody knows about heaty food and cooling food and neutral food. So that is still very much in people's minds. And also just a different nature of China as a group culture, because somebody put a question in a chat about what do the Chinese feel about CCTV being everywhere. And without getting into any politics or anything, I just want to say that the social contract in China is very different. So it's not, people should not think that Western values are what is really important in China. People, besides everything you can talk about, the type of government and pressure or not pressure, like fundamentally, people have different values and different things that are maybe important to them and a different social contract. So that's important to realize, I think.
Is just to embrace the Chinese different distribution channel and also the different tools. As what Frank mentioned before and Katie mentioned before, we have got to meet various and very active new KOL or marketing tools. And one negative point is that maybe try to, as what Felicia has said, try to think, you know, and try to bring all the Western values to Chinese markets, because maybe there's some in every country they have their own politically correct and political correctness. So maybe in some Western countries or other or the rest of the world, you have shared some values which you think is political correct. But in China, we have our own political correctness. I think it's sometimes we have to be very careful also.
The first example must to find a more segmented positioning, because I think there's food, like loads of products out there flying in China market. In order to break through or have their own place for the brands, we need to start it very hard to define a clear, specific positioning. Smaller the better, because it's already done for the big positioning era. I believe that's already done. So now is the time for small positioning, sharp positioning. And the second thing I would say for international brand, there's a lot of advantages that the international brand has, and try to just still embrace that advantage. And that would be the biggest differentiator between international brands and Chinese brands. So just be true to who you are, be true to the brand truth and the brand nature, and try to bring that value to Chinese consumers.
I think the most points I agree with Katie, Felicia. It's about just culture. We respect different culture, and it is how Chinese people think. It is different from the Western, but it's totally fine. We can find a balance, no matter it's from the message, no matter it's from the belief, no matter it's from how we think life should be.
International Western brands have to achieve that balance between who they are as a Western brand, international brand, and localizing. And it's not going to be the same answer for each brand. I mean, I see some brands go into China and they don't even translate their name because that works for them, because all of their brand image and brand properties are anchored in their identity and how incredibly French they are and how they are anchored in Provence, in France. So that could be one thing. But then maybe you need to think about localizing, obviously, everything that has to do with promotion, with social media, with all your promotional channels. But in terms of brand image, it's not always the same answer, right? I mean, we all know about KFC that has gone very, very far in localizing and very successfully, and some other brands, especially luxury brands, that remained very close to their heritage and to their own sort of national characteristics. So, but I think it really merit some thought around that? How do you best express your own unique brand universe in China, and what is going to be appealing about it to the Chinese consumer?
Thank you very much to all of you. It was absolutely fascinating from a cultural standpoint. And what else can I say? You all concluded towards, this need to really get those cultures to merge and understanding, obviously, the local culture, but being true to, who you are as a global brand. And I think that's really the key message. But quick points I thought were really interesting, and there are many, so I'll try to go really quickly. But I think one point that was made about China still being one of the first overseas market for many brands is true. And so I think it's very important in terms of understanding how to crack it culturally and really understanding it. Also, I think a lot of brands and a lot of countries can learn from China, because there's a lot of innovation going on, notably around e-commerce, live stream shopping, the evolution to social e-commerce that you were mentioning, virtual KOLs. So I think there's a lot happening that will happen later on in other countries and in the West that a lot of brands should be mindful of and learn from in China. The whole thing around experience versus functionality is also a big one, I think, that you raised, and is super interesting, because it is about content and brand experience, and product comes second. Again, I think the West has to catch up on that and is not there yet, and it's something that will come. So really, really interesting that. The brand trust deficit is also an interesting one. We talked about it around, sustainability, but also other areas. And I think it's a really valid point. That's a very universal point, and it's very valid, but I think it was really, really fascinating. The rise of rural China with, tech and government pushing this agenda forward is also quite interesting. But of course, it is a very big country. So as you were mentioning around sustainability, not everyone is evolving at the same pace with things like sustainability. So I thought that was really, really interesting. And I guess the last point I thought was quite interesting, going back and tying up on the cultural element, was, I think it was Katie's point about cultural diversity not necessarily being about people, but more so around, traditions, destination, food, because ethnically speaking, China is not as diverse as other countries may be, but it is, from a Western point of view, a very culturally diverse and different country, which makes it very fascinating. So thank you so much. It was really, really interesting.